Two things, actually.
Other questions are they going to ask me in that half a minute? So that's valuable time for you to start thinking about the topic. Because prediction is a very good part of this. So a cultural event, what could they ask you? Maybe are there other cultural events in Iran? Is family an important part of the cultural event? Is food an important part of the cultural event? So all these things, and do you think cultural events are important? So all these kinds of things in your mind you should be thinking about in that half a minute that they're transitioning from the part 2 to the part 3. So that's valuable time that shouldn't be just wasted just listening, because you know pretty much they're going to say we're going to talk about this topic. And it's going to be, part 3 is a discussion. I must say, in part 1, the examiner, it's all recorded, and the examiner also must stick to a very strict protocol. In part 1, the examiner is not allowed to change the question. So if you say in part 1, I don't understand, all the examiner can do is repeat the question. We are not allowed to paraphrase, put it in a different way. All we're allowed to do is repeat it once. And if the candidate still doesn't understand, we just have to move on. If that does happen, it's not a great tragedy as long as the rest of the speaking test is okay. Because sometimes somebody, they just don't quite understand the question or they don't have anything to say. But if it just happens once, it's not too bad. So tell people if that happens not to get too nervous, because the rest it goes on for 12 to 14 minutes, the test. So you have all that time to prove yourself. So it's quite a long time. So if you muck up one question, don't worry about it. Just keep focusing on the rest. Don't think, oh no, I've failed the whole test. It's going to be terrible. Don't think that. Just think we're moving on, and the examiner is going to judge you on the whole test. So if you make one little pronunciation slip up, or you say one time or something like that, it's not going to affect it too much, as long as you don't keep doing that. Okay, so it's a discussion. So one little tip is, the more you speak with the questions, the less questions you'll be asked. Because you have 4 to 5 minutes for this, and the examiner is on a very strict time schedule. You might see the examiner looking at the watch or looking at the timer. It's very strict. Part 1 is 4 to 5 minutes. Part 2 will 1 minute to think about it, and 2 minutes to speak, and then there's the rounding off. So that's probably 4. And for part 3, it's a very strict 4 to 5 minutes. So the examiner cannot go over. So if the examiner all of a sudden says at the end, oh, thank you, the speaking test is over, it means you've reached the time limit. So don't tell students not to get nervous about that. So as I said, it's a discussion. So the more you speak, the more you elaborate on the questions, the less questions you'll be asked. And another tip is that there are 3 different brackets of questions. The first lot are the easiest, the second lot are a little bit harder, and the third lot are, a bit harder still. So if you are elaborating on questions, they're not going to get to the harder ones. So that's another good hint. So, and just to answer them fully, like even if you don't know much about that, try and give examples, or there's nothing, you don't have a personal answer, say that my friend did this, or just try and just think widely. But the whole idea is just to keep talking and just answer them fully. And have opinions. It doesn't matter what you say, really. The examiner doesn't really care. You can have any opinion, although try not to give extreme opinions. Like, it wouldn't come up, but for example, don't give opinions on capital punishment, something like that. Nothing extreme. But apart from that, it doesn't matter really what your opinion is, because as an examiner, we're not judgmental. We don't mind what your opinion is, as long as you have an opinion. So now we're talking about the writing test. This is the test that students often find most challenging, but it is the test that you can practice a lot for. So in the writing test, timing is crucial. Often I've had students who are quite good at writing, but they messed it up because of the timing. So they spent a long time on task 1, and they didn't have enough time to finish task 2, and they didn't get a good mark. So the timing is really crucial. Students must stick to 20 minutes for task 1, because task 1 is worth less. Task 2 is worth more points, so it's important that you finish the task 2. Some people ask me, oh, should I do task 1 first or task 2 first? Well, it's really a personal choice. The task 1 is a shorter piece, so sometimes that gets you into the way of writing, and then you're sort of on a roll, or you have a flow going, so sometimes it's best to start with task 1. I think that if it's general training, I would say definitely start with task 1, because the letter is quite easy, really. For the task 1 academic, the graphs are more challenging, and the only way to improve on them, I know, thank you. The only way to improve on the task 1 academic is practice. It's just going over lots and lots of graphs, trying to find the overview. The overview is the single most important part of the task 1 academic essay. If you don't have an overview, you can't get a high mark. So that's very important. So I suggest to all my students to spend 5 minutes planning. This is so important, to spend the time planning, because if you just see the topic, oh yes, I know about that, and you start writing, I guarantee you will not be able to write a good essay. The structure of the essay for task 1 and task 2 is very important. The task 1, the overview, you need to spend, I think, well, if you're very quick, maybe 3 minutes, but I think 5 minutes for most people, to look for the overview, the trends, the major trend, what is the graph or graphs, what are they showing, to work that out. Because that's, as I said, the most important part of the task 1 academic essay. Now the word length, some people think the more you write, the better, but that's not true. So you could write a little bit more. Task 1 is 150 words. If you want to write a little bit more, 180, that's fine. But try not to write more than that, because the more you write, the more mistakes. So, and it's not true that the more words, the better the essay. In fact, the opposite is true. If you write a lot and you haven't thought about the topic, it won't be a good essay. And plus, if the examiner sees in the task 2 4 or 5 pages, they're just a little bit annoyed and think, oh, I've got to read this, and they're on a time limit too. And I have candidates when I've been writing from a particular country. It's not Iran, it's a different country, but they think that the more you write, the better. So they see the topic and they just write. And they're writing rubbish, basically, it's rubbish. And they will never get a high score for that, because basically the essay has no structure. So, okay, talking about the task 1 academic a bit more. So, 4 to 5 minutes planning the essay, and to paraphrase the question. If you don't paraphrase the question, if you just copy the question exactly as it is, what the examiner will do is count all those words that you have copied. It might be 14, 15 words, and they will deduct those words from the word length. So if you're close to the word length, it's 150 words. If you haven't quite got that, it will be, they will be deducted. So if you deduct 14 words from 150, that brings you into 136. My mathematics is right, because I'm not very good at mathematics. But yeah, so it brings you below the word length. So you must, that's the first thing, paraphrase the question, and that's easy, pretty easy, as long as you practice paraphrasing with the students. That's the easiest part of it. And then the question is where to put the overview. I suggest to my students to put the overview in the introduction. You can put it at the end, it's up to you. But because the overview is the most important part, I think it's good to get it over with in the beginning of the essay, at the task 1 essay, yes. So, as I said, you can put it at the end. It makes a nice conclusion. But if you paraphrase the question is not. So you paraphrase the question, then we have the overview, and then you have the trends and data. You must have trends, not just listing all the data, because that's not meant to be talking about trends, but you must have some data. The trends and data. And using transition words. These are really, really important, and in the writing test, you've got 4 categories this time. You've got, first one is task response, which basically means have you answered the question and how well have you answered the question. And in task 1, overview is included there. So if you have no overview, the first part will go down to a 5. So it's really, really important to find that overview. The second part is coherence. Coherence refers to paragraphing. In the task 1 essay, it's 150 words. So in 150 words, you don't really have to have paragraphs. But I think in a task 1 academic, to have a little introduction of rephrasing the topic and the overview is fine. And then the second part, you do not need an introduction because it's only 150 words. If you want, they could have the overview as a conclusion if they want. It's up to the candidate. But I think it's better in the introduction. So transition words, you must have transition words because that refers to the second criterion. So just the typical ones are fine, in addition, furthermore, on the other hand, etc., etc. So, writing test task 2. So, as I said with the other one, 5 minutes to plan. You have 40 minutes for this, so you can take 5 minutes. Please tell your students not to just start writing, because it won't be good. So, you brainstorm the points, and choose the best 2 or 3 main points. If you have 10 ideas, choose the best 2 or 3. So, as you know, it needs a structure, so an introduction is essential. Introduction where you should state what you're going to do in the essay. And if the essay has asked for your opinion, you should give your opinion here in the introduction. That is really, really important. Some essays don't ask for your opinion, and that's fine, but you should still state in the introduction what you're going to talk about in the essay. But if it asks for your opinion, definitely put it into the introduction. Technically, you don't have to have it there. The opinion could be anywhere in the essay. However, if the opinion is in the introduction, it's clear. The examiner knows, oh, you have this opinion, and that's what you're going to use for the whole essay. So I think it's essential. And plus, for the examiner, it's clear. And oh, great, they've given their opinion, and then the points are going to follow. So, the paragraphs. So, body paragraphs, you can have 2 or 3. You only need 2. But sometimes, if you've got 3 points, you may like to have 3 body paragraphs. It's totally up to you, no more. This essay is 250 words, as you know. You can write a little bit more. If you write a little bit more, it would be a little bit better. Essay, say 280, but 250 is the minimum. Don't write more than 280 because, as I said, the more you write, the more grammatical errors you're going to make, the more vocabulary or spelling mistakes you could possibly make. So it's not good to write too much. So just 250 to 280 I think is perfect. With paragraphs, which is the second criterion on the assessment, there are 4 as I mentioned. Paragraphing is in this section. And with the task 2 essay, the paragraphing is really, really important. So, as I said, we have an introduction, and there are 2 methods of paragraphing. One is to indent, and one is to leave a line. IELTS examiners much, much prefer the second method of leaving a line. Why? Because it's clear. It's clear. The IELTS examiners, they don't spend a lot of time correcting the essays, and so if your essay is clear, you're more likely to get a better mark. So, introduction, leave a line, a whole line. And then you start body paragraph 1. So always begin with something like, to begin with, first of all, something like that. Try not to have firstly, secondly, thirdly. It's okay, it's correct, but it's a bit less mature. It's more mature to use some of the transition words on board. To begin with, furthermore, in addition, additionally, on the other hand, in contrast, these kinds of words are a little bit more mature, shows more mature writing. So each paragraph should have one main point. You can have sub-points, of course, but it should have one main point to each paragraph. You can add examples and evidence. You don't have to have examples, but you can have examples because it strengthens the argument and evidence. You can say something like, research indicates blah, blah, blah. You don't have to cite, you don't have to say, Smith and Brown state that blah. You don't have to do that. You can just say, research indicates, even if you have never seen research on that. It doesn't matter. It just sounds good. Adds a bit of strength. And the concluding sentence to a perfect paragraph has a topic sentence, then adding evidence and other subpoints, and a concluding sentence. The concluding sentence is the least important part of the paragraph. So if your candidate is really good and can think of a concluding sentence quickly, fantastic. However, if they can't think of something quickly, please don't spend minutes thinking of a good concluding sentence. Just skip it. It's the least important part of the paragraph. Because it's more important to write 4 or 5 good paragraphs and to have a conclusion than to think up a concluding sentence. We've talked about transition words. Conclusion. A conclusion is essential. You cannot get a 7 or maybe even a 6 for an essay that does not have a conclusion. So if a student is writing and they get halfway through body paragraph 2 and they have run out of time, they've got 2 minutes to go, 3 minutes to go, tell them to stop the body paragraph 2 and start on the conclusion, even if they have one sentence. Because if you don't have a conclusion, the essay will not get a good mark. So that is absolutely essential. If they see, oh, maybe we've got 7 minutes to go, oh, I haven't got much time, still writing body paragraph 2, maybe stop that, write a conclusion. 1 or 2 sentences is enough. You don't need a long conclusion, and also you do not need a long introduction. Do not write long introductions because it's more important to talk about the facts, the points, back up your argument. So the introduction should only be 3 or 4 sentences at most. So, conclusion is important, and then if the student hasn't finished the body paragraph 2, they can go back to it. But if you have no conclusion, you'll lose more marks. Okay. Now we're going to do an activity. A bit of talking, so we're going to do an activity. So, some very kind teachers helped me to put these around the room. Thank you for that. So, you'll see around the room we have 7 what we call Hawaiian skirts or grass skirts. It's just a name because if you look at it, it looks like a skirt, like a Hawaiian skirt or a grass skirt. That's why we call it that. It's just a name. So, in order to practice paraphrasing, we use these grass skirts or Hawaiian skirts a lot. You can easily make them. You can use them for grammar. You can write 10 sentences which have incorrect grammar, and then students have to correct the grammar and bring it out to you. I've done this one on paraphrasing. So, how to paraphrase, very briefly. So, synonyms and paraphrases. So, in task 1 academic, you must paraphrase the first sentence, so you need to spend some time working on that if you have an arts class. So, synonyms, so if they say it's a graph, say, well, it's a line graph, that's not exactly that you're adding more information, and just changing the words. If it says the line graph shows, you say the line graph illustrates, so just always using synonyms for those words. And paraphrases, and changing word forms from noun to verb or to adjectives, so word forms. Changing the sentence structure, put the back part of the sentence to the front part of the sentence. Joining sentences using conjunctions or relative pronouns. and changing the voice from active to passive, active to passive, oh, what's that twice? Oh, should be passive to active, sorry. Active to passive, passive to active, yeah. So, I'm going to put you into groups, and then after that, okay, so I'm going to put you into groups, and then in your groups, groups of about 5 or 6 people, you will go to one of those, you will tear off number 1. In your group, you will paraphrase it according to what it says. The first one says synonyms, so try and find some synonyms, 1 or 2 in the sentence, write it on a piece of paper, and then you bring it to me. You'll be the teachers, but we're just practicing. So bring it to me and I will correct it, and then if it's right, I tell you to sit down, go to the next one. If it's incorrect, student sits down, they have to correct it again. So it's a really, really great, the students love it, it gets them up, being active, especially for teenagers, who will be really young. So the second one will be changing word forms, and anyway, you can read them. So I'll just count you, and talking about grouping, I'm about to regroup you. So this is what I do in class a lot. So you are number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, there, you just join in. There's an option.
Just interjecting ideas.
Alright, so there's just one last activity. So I think we're having a break in a minute, and I'll just hand these out. I'm not sure we'll have much time, but please have a look. So, are we in the groups, or I'll just give them out randomly? You can have a look.
Come on, take it easy. Okay,
just basically, this is a board game for IELTS. I've actually put two, one on either side for you. So they're IELTS board games, and the first one, as you can see here, is not a very good copy, but it's for speaking. So you just get the dice. We were going to do this, but we don't have time, but you can get the idea. And so you just use a dice, and when somebody lands on one square, for example, tell me about your family, the person must speak for 2 minutes about their family. So these are all typical IELTS topics, and it's a really great way and a fun way for students to practice the topics and try to get to the 2 minutes. So yeah, we use these games quite a lot. And so the whole idea, IELTS can be very tedious, very dry, and very tiring. So it's good to break it up with a game, just to make it a bit of fun. And plus these games, they're actually learning something. So there are two sides of games there, and Mark can photocopy them for you if you need them. So that's basically it. And as I said, you just need some dice, and that's it. So the last activity, we don't have time for this, but basically it was just getting in groups and actually writing an IELTS essay, but it's just the idea. So, I think I mentioned this activity before, that for some IELTS essays, of course, I would correct them, but for others, to get model essays, you have a topic, students brainstorm a topic for ideas. If it's a for and against or a two-part essay, you have two columns with two ideas on both sides. And then you have to have your introduction, body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, or maybe 3 body paragraphs, conclusion. So each group writes the introduction, and the teacher walks around the room and corrects the introduction. Maybe you can ask 1 or 2 students to read out their introduction, a couple of good ones. But the benefit of this is that they're in groups. So students are working together and trying to create a good IELTS essay in groups. I always tell students in the beginning, when they're starting off to write IELTS essays, not to worry about the time. Because the first thing is to get the essay right, to get the structure right, and to start writing a good essay. I don't care if they take an hour and a half, if they're doing it at home, of course. And then once they've got the structure right, then work on the timing after. The most important thing is to get it right. And then each group would write on the board, etc. A spokesperson from each group can read their introduction, and then the groups write body paragraphs 1, 2 and 3 in conclusion, and the teacher suggests navigation and makes corrections, and different spokespeople can read different parts. And then other students can take photos. At Monash, all the Chinese students always take photos of everything. So it's good that they've got a copy, say, of 5 essays that the teacher has corrected on that topic. And I'll just show the topic here. This is a good topic. You can take a photo if you want. This is one of the topics, like health and technology, education, these types of things are common. So in many countries, the weight of many people in the population is increasing and levels of health and fitness are decreasing. So each part of the question must be addressed. So I corrected an essay of one student who just talked about the weight without referring to the fitness. So obviously that wouldn't get a very high mark if the person has not referred to every part of the essay. And then it says, what do you think are the causes of these problems and what measures could be taken to improve? So basically it's got two parts. What are the causes and what are the measures to be taken? So you must answer both parts. That's the most essential part. So you could have body paragraph 1 talking about the causes of the problems of obesity and lack of fitness, and then body paragraph 2 talking about the solutions. So this essay has a very clear structure to me. So that's why I say it's important to spend 5 minutes reading the topic carefully, working out, is there just one section? There's just one part, then you could have 2 or 3 body paragraphs talking about that one part of it, but sometimes, very often they have 2 parts, and this is where a lot of students become confused. They only answer one part, or they spend 3/4 of the essay answering one part, and then a tiny mention of the second part. So you must, as I said, this is obvious, that would be first body paragraph causes, second body paragraph the measures. So that's important to analyse the essay before they start writing. Okay, I think that's about it, and we're right on the dot, 11 o'clock, 2 minutes to. So I think we're finished session